Wisdom. It's an incredibly valuable asset. Some would say more precious than gold. It's attractive, appealing, admirable. Conversely, a lack of wisdom is the basis of immaturity, blind spots, and bad decisions. Wisdom. It can be gained over time, but it can't be rushed. But wisdom can be shared. That's precisely what we are here to do right now. Today, we are here to hack wisdom, to distill it, to understand it, and to process it. Why? To get better at life. Welcome to The Main Thing. This is your new 9-minute podcast. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg, and I've set out to interview the wisest people I know. We'll see what we can learn from each one when they're faced with an incredibly difficult, soul-piercing question. Mark Daly, welcome to the Main Thing podcast. Great to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Skip. It is great to be with you as well.
So, Mark, folks will have just heard, and perhaps they clicked to listen because they heard you introduced as a casket maker. What kind of reaction do you get when people ask you what you do, and how do you respond to that?
I usually sort of eke out an answer. I don't shout, I build coffins. I usually say I'm a woodworker. And then very often there's a follow-up question. Oh, what sort of things do you build? And then I say, I build caskets. And the reactions I get, can be either intrigue or recoiling, depending on who the person is and maybe where they are at that moment. And if the opportunity exists, though, I try to get in there as quickly as possible. That it's not anything I ever expected to be doing with my life. I don't come from generations of casket makers, but that I had been a boat builder, and I was a boat builder because I liked the idea of making something beautiful with my hands for people to have little adventures. And then I say, and now I get to make something with my hands for people to have the greatest adventure of all. And it's an opportunity to kind of bring the reality of death into people's minds and their awareness, because that's what we've heard throughout history, that there's a lot of wisdom in recognizing that this life is passing, but I try to do it in a way that opens the possibility of that being an exciting curiosity instigator rather than just a jarring, well, that's a weird thing to be doing with your
Right. For some, a fearful, daunting topic.
Yeah, for all of us, it's sometimes, I would say.
Mark, before we get much further into this conversation, it's going to be fascinating, and I can't wait to explore your wisdom and the work that you do. But I want to just help the listeners out to understand who's talking to who here. How do these two rascals know each other? Mark, if you want to start that story, I'll chime in with some attempts at humor and color commentary.
Yeah, well, so 1986, I loaded up the family Nissan Sentra, and I headed off at the age of 18 to college, and I went to West Virginia University in beautiful Morgantown, West Virginia. There it is. Let's go Mountaineers.
Go Mountaineers. Right.
And, I moved in. I actually went there with a couple of friends of mine from high school, and we all lived in the same room. I wasn't even sure if I was going to go to college, and I ended up going to WVU. And they were, I think, maybe the ones who were like, we should check out some fraternities. And so, or maybe we would just walk back to our not so organized dorm room, and we would go by this place that looked like people were having a lot of fun outside right across the street from where we were. And we thought, well, let's go check that out. And that was the fraternity house for Phi Sigma Kappa. And you were already a brother there. And so I pledged there and somehow, gave enough appearance that I could be accepted into that fine group of men, and made it through the various modest hurdles and challenges that come with that. And you and I became friends. In fact, I remember that freshman year, you and I took a trip to Canada. That was like my first big college adventure.
Oh gosh, I forgot. I mean, I remember that trip, but the details of who went fuzzy, because it was just like today. It was a Friday afternoon, and someone got a wild idea that we're going to go to Canada. We're just going to drive north up I-79 through Erie. We're going to hit the Canadian border, and we're going to visit Niagara Falls. And while we're up there, we're going to grab some premium Canadian lager.
We did indeed. Yep. There was a special brand of Molson, I think, that was only available on that side of the border.
Mark, you mentioned the friends that came with you, and this just really enchanting, fun, funny foursome of guys with you and Mark Sarian, Kevin McCormick, and Chris Garrity. And you guys all came into Phi Sigma Kappa at the same time, and you were just like a comedy troupe, very gregarious and just funny. And you brought a Philly sense of humor. You brought Philly music like the Beastie Boys down to West Virginia, and whether you recognize it or not at the time, you guys really impacted on the culture of our group of friends there at the fraternity, and it was a great impact that you all made.
Well, that's nice. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we definitely had our sort of merry band of high school hijinks that we carried on with us into college for good
Yeah,
and for ill. But I'm glad that yeah, we are fortunate to be around people who didn't take things too seriously.
I'm gonna guess that you stay in touch with all or most of those guys.
To varying degrees, I saw young, not so young, on the bus McCormick yesterday. I drove a casket down to Philadelphia, and I stopped off and had a cup of coffee with him. It's the first time I've seen him in a couple of years, actually. I think so.
That's awesome.
We walked around my old hometown and chewed the fat for a little bit. So that was great.
And the aforementioned brother Sarian, Mark Sarian, is made a career, moved to Hollywood, and made a career out of acting. And I'll see him on commercials. I'll see him in support roles on movies, TV shows, and so that's always wild when his face pops up.
It is, yeah. During the occasional football game or whatever, you're sitting around with your kids. You're like, "Hey, that's my old pal Yorgi."
Mark, the other thing that you and I have in common, we have much in common, but one of those things is that we both have a podcast. This one that we're recording right now, and then yours is called Die Human. Tell our
Yes,
audience a bit about your show, what they'll find, and why they might want to tune into it for a bit.
doing this work, over the years, it's obviously it generates a lot of pondering. I mean, a lot of the times I have my sons or employees working with me in the shop, but a lot of times I'm by myself also. And so, I've returned to my faith, my childhood faith. I'm Catholic, and thinking about death in light of God's love for us and this hardship. It's like there's so many books to read. There's so much scripture to ponder. There's just so many thoughts that come into my head through conversations that I have with people. I feel like I'm having poured into me through this work,
Mm.
a lot of wisdom about what it is to live a good life, to die a good death, which is the result of living a good life. And I've just with this medium we have, with the communication technology we have, my desire is to reflect some of that back in some way to people, to be an encouragement. So with Die Human, really, like the essence of the name is just that holding on to our humanity is the most important thing we need to do, because everything that's good, true, and beautiful comes out of human flourishing, or leads to human flourishing and comes out of human flourishing. And divine and human par excellence is our Lord Jesus. And so the more we can try to follow his example and live a holy life, the easier our death's going to be, because he paved the way. He paved the way through death to eternity for us. But if we don't stay on that path, the walk is harder, the death is harder, life is harder. We've always had the fear that can drive our kind of diminishing humanity, because it can diminish our love. Fear can get in the way of love
For
because we
sure.
can become too self-centered and not other-centered. So really, Die Human is just my attempt to have conversations about good books I've read, or with people who are very thoughtful about these things, or people who have written books, people who have had even like near death experiences. And I haven't done a lot of that. That's something I hope to do more with.
Yeah.
But just to help people to see that really the key to a good life and a good death is just to it's an imitation of Christ to the best degree we're able to, so that we can have the fullness of the humanity that he's given us, which is his image and likeness.
I can't think of anything really more important. So thank you for that work that you're doing. Where can folks find that?
Yeah. Thank you. It's at YouTube, and it's Die Human Podcast. That's the name of it. And so it's at Die Human Podcast at YouTube.
Mark, now you've told us a little bit about your business, how we're connected. I just had a strange urge to know what you wanted to be when you were a young boy. What did you think you wanted to do when you grew up? And I don't know where that's coming from. And if you want to throw that back on me, I'll take a stab at it as well.
All right. I wanted to be a stuntman.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So I never got paid, but I just took risks all the time,
Okay.
up until yesterday, for free.
And the day's not over.
The day is not over. No, it's only because I'm doing this podcast that I'm not doing something mildly stupid with my body.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, and in
Yeah.
fact, when I was 21, I had an uncle who knew a retired stuntman, and I was like, "Oh, I wanna talk to him because like, how does one do this?" And he told me, "You're too old."
My gosh.
So, that was it.
At
It's
age
like, all that like,
22?
someday pass, buddy. Sorry."
Wow. What makes a good stuntman? Maybe
What
kinda
makes a good
nimble, like
stuntman?
a
I don't know,
spry,
I didn't look
nimble,
into it much. I just jumped off roofs and stuff. I didn't really look
heals
into what.
heals well
Huh?
from injuries,
Heal yeah, healing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought it was just fearlessness or, like,
tolerance of
risk
pain.
taking. Yeah, but there probably is a lot more to it than that. I was probably just felt like being a little bit reckless and thought maybe I could make money off of that, but no, those never came together. No, I should look back on that. What it doesn't matter anymore, I guess. CGI is probably doing away with all that sort of thing.
I guess so.
It'd be a sad story, be the last to die in the last stunt before
Yeah.
CGI totally took over. Like,
Yeah.
if we just would have been one day early. Dang it.
That's something we need to keep a watch on, because I feel like we're on the precipice of that if it hasn't already tipped.
Yeah. Well, I'm real, and I think you are too, so
I am.
praise God for
I'm
that.
so real and striving to be human.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
Yes. Definitely the imperfections of humanity are part of it.
Mark, I have also introduced you and teased out a detail that's intriguing to me, fascinating, in fact, that you were a commercial fisherman at a different stage of your career and worked on a commercial fishing boat. I'd love to hear a glimpse of what that life was like. What led you to that? And, is it like what we see on some of the cable reality shows?
Well, if you can't be a stuntman, there's another risky profession, but it wasn't as risky as like like the deadliest catch where they're up in like the Bering Sea in the middle of winter and there's ice on the deck. I was a salmon fisherman in Southeast Alaska, so ice wasn't a factor, but people did get hurt. People did die. Well, what led me to it, I think, was really the draw to go out and just have an adventure in a beautiful place. So I went to Alaska, and actually, the first time I went up there, I ended up hitchhiking around the state and working in a cannery. I didn't get on a boat, and so I was just on a
Okay.
slime line cleaning fish. Talking
Wow.
about blood and guts. That was fish
Wow.
blood and fish guts, but there was a
Yeah.
lot of it. And then I went back a little while later, and I got on a purse seiner fishing for salmon. And the work itself, it was really honest, and I appreciated that. It was just super elemental, like you're just trying to bring the fish in and get them off and get paid for them. And you get a share, you get a percentage of the catch. So if the boat does
Okay.
well, you do well, and if it doesn't do well, you don't do that well. It was also hard because it's close confinement with there are 5 people on the boat, and not everybody was necessarily, like, seeking to live the most virtuous lives.
Or maybe perhaps pursue the optimal hygiene.
Well, yeah, it was luckily, God is merciful, and, your olfactory nerves give up if you don't respond to their warning signs after a while.
Okay.
You get smell hardened. So, like, you
Okay.
just don't pick up on things. That's why, yeah, no, I don't know if you've ever been camping or stuff like that when you walk into the house and your parents or somebody's there, and, like, you had no idea that you were
Right.
so
Right.
offensive until they reacted. I just wanted to go far away, nobody I knew, do something hard, and to do it in a beautiful place. That was that was great.
That's fascinating. I want to know a little bit more about the decision and the journey to go there. So, like, if you today, someone listening wants to be a commercial fisherman, like, where do they look? Where do they go? Did you respond to like a want ad, or did you just hop in the car and like, I'm going to Alaska and I want to find a fishing crew? Like, what was that like?
Hopped on a plane. The first time I was hitchhiking all around, and I was just going to port towns, and I was walking around on the docks and just talking to skippers on boats when I saw people working on them and things. Um, That's probably the best way in a lot of ways because then people get an honest impression of who
Yeah.
you are. I don't know what exists now in the world of like the internet as far as like trying to sign up for something. There was this little book that was published. Like I saw it in the Daily Athenaeum, the WVU daily newspaper. There was a little ad for like commercial fishing jobs. And really what it was you sent away for this little book for 4.95 or whatever, and they told you about
Okay.
the different places in Alaska where boats went out of and the different species of salmon, so you didn't sound like a total idiot, and then you could go around with that. So it was a little guide, and they probably advertised it in like every school in the country.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's what did it, is just seeing
Wow.
that and being like, I'm going to go do that. There would also be ads for like camp counselor stuff. And I was like, because I wanted to go somewhere far away and pretty, but I thought, oh, being on a boat, that would be really neat.
Yeah, for sure. Just out of curiosity, were there also ads to send off for a packet of sea monkeys in those publications?
I don't remember in college, but I definitely had sea monkeys when I was in elementary school. Yeah. That's the place to start. If you want to get into commercial fishing, start with those krill or whatever and just get to know aquatic life. And then make sure when you talk to those old crusty skippers, you say, "Well, I had sea monkeys when I was 7," and
That'll do.
you're in.
That'll do it. It's like the secret password. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, let's jump ahead to current times. By the way, the fishing part of your life story is awesome. I really love it. And
Oh, it was good. And it led me out west, and the boat that I ended up on was out of Seattle, so we would go up from Seattle to Southeast Alaska. It was like a 3-day journey, and it was beautiful going up through there, and that's what led me kinda to end up settling in Seattle, which led me to meet my wife and all sorts of great things. So, you know, I didn't see a map. I didn't have a perfect plan like I never have.
yeah,
God just blessed me abundantly.
he sure did. Yeah, that you couldn't have drawn that up.
No. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was advised many times in my life and still am that it's good to have a map, and I totally agree with that. But once again, God in His mercy doesn't always take it out on those of us who aren't expert cartographers.
Yeah. Yeah. And once you kind of let him lead and depend on him, there's no surprises, no coincidences. You just smile and okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And gosh, you're creative. Yeah. So let's talk a bit more, Mark, about casket making, the process, the craft of it. How did you learn to do it? Did you start in, I'm going to guess you started in woodworking. You told us a bit ago that you wanted to build boats.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
did
So
that
I
love where did that love for woodworking come from?
yeah, well, kind of like fishing. I wanted to do something that felt was tangible. And actually, when I
Mm,
was working on the fishing boat, there would be little projects like in the galley, building a new galley table and doing some works like that. So that there was a little bit of opportunity there. And then out in Seattle, I had a friend who had a software business, and he and I got this really dumpy little old corner grocery store slash laundromat that was just falling apart. And we fixed it up and we built some apartments in there and built a little coffee shop that he started in there. And so that was like more, like residential construction stuff. So I started getting a little more familiarity and facility with tools, but, we was on a budget and it was just kinda junky drills and didn't really understand how big a difference good tools could make at that point in my life. And I started working a landscaping job and I started doing landscape carpentry for that. And then after Kelly and I got together, I started taking classes at a school called Seattle Central Community College that actually had a maritime carpentry program, so you could learn boat building there. And that's where I was like, so I was hoping to kind of merge, like the love of the sea and the fishing and all that with working with my hands. So I took
right on.
classes there, and that's where I really started to dial in on like, there's a lot that can be done, and there's a lot of ways it can be done better.
First of all, I love the your just innate desire to do something tangible, whether that was fishing or carpentry.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah,
I
I think
mean,
I
especially for me, who's someone who has made most of his career in the theoretical, mathematical, virtual, digital. I love that contrast, and I respect that when where it comes from in you.
yeah, thank you. And I mean, part of it is that I can get lost in my head too. I'm kind of a daydreamy kind of person. I love to read. I was an English major primarily. That's cool. I
Yeah,
went through a couple
yeah,
things. Just sort of that gauge of how things are going to be able to put out some effort, see some results was just that's been I mean, no matter how theoretical and mathematical or whatever, I think, like we were talking about with just what it means to be human, we're creative by nature. And so whether it's creating through ideas digitally or creating through wood physically, that's a huge part of what it means to be human.
yeah, yeah. I think for me, just relating to what you're saying here, and again, spending so much of my work and time and even hobbies in the digital and theoretical and word space, what grounds me is I like this sounds crazy, but I like to do yard work. I like to plant flower baskets and do, clear brush and pull weeds. And when
Yeah.
my hands are in the dirt and touching plants and soil, I just find that so grounding and gratifying, and I really can be in touch with my soul and my thoughts. And so I
Yeah.
get it.
Makes tons of sense. Yep.
Something tangible and real and grounded.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, a little further in the woodworking, did you study under a mentor, a master craftsman? Take us a little deeper into your craft, and also as you take us there, first time you built a casket.
Yeah.
So you're
Well,
on boats, you're building boats, and you're getting good at carpentry. You've got this kind of innate talent, skill for building things. And then so from
yeah, I don't know.
boats, when was the first casket?
So
Did you make a square boat and it just wasn't seaworthy? And you're like, hey, this might be a good casket if we just finished it out a little differently and trimmed it.
yeah, as funny as that is, I did make one thing that did not work the way I wanted it to when I was doing landscape carpentry, and I ended up having it took me a long time, and I ended up having to throw it in the dump, and I was like, maybe that I had, like, this low moment where I was like, "Maybe my work just belongs in the ground." So, that was a little foreshadowing, I guess.
Yeah.
But, no, I didn't make a square boat so much. I was finished with those classes, and we were doing landscaping, Kelly and I. Actually, it was when she had a miscarriage, so the first casket I built was for our little baby, because it was just like, know, you have to respond to this in some way.
Mm,
I
yes.
we were home, and it was early in in the pregnancy, but not so early that there wasn't a little body there. It's like, what do I do? And it's like, oh,
Mm,
I need to honor this little life that has
course.
impacted us, and please God will impact us forever. And so that was the first time, and I was just like, oh, that was really important to be involved, and especially with a miscarriage, like, a lot of people don't really acknowledge humanity. I mean, we have certain laws in this country that, allow you to basically just dispose of an unborn human being in a way that is not the way we dispose of a child or an adult. Dispose is a crass word, but the way yeah, it's disposal versus honoring. Anyway, it was like, this is my baby, and I have to still do everything I can, and now this little one is passed, but there's gotta be something I can do, and so that's what we did, and we had, I think, we had 2 children at that point, and they were just super little. I wanted our family to be like, we had been excited about mommy's pregnancy, and
Sure.
now I didn't wanna just be like, "This is well, it's just gone." It's like, "Okay, we're gonna see this through in whatever way we can under God's providential care," and so that was the first casket I made.
Wow. Touching story. I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of people undergo that loss quietly. That's one of the things we do now is build caskets for families who suffered miscarriage and give them to them. Also for
Mm,
people who've lost a child, as an infant or uh, or an adolescent, just to try to alleviate that burden and let them know that they're loved. Yeah.
yeah. Mark, in your craft, building caskets, working with wood, take us a little bit, pull back the curtain, take us behind the scenes a little bit and share with us one or two details that might surprise the listener.
As far as well, one of the things is it's very much a part of our faith life. So, I mean, I'm not in a constant state of prayer while I'm building the caskets, but prayer is definitely a part of it. I'm thinking about who this is for a lot of the time, maybe
Mm,
most of the time I know who the casket is for. Sometimes I just try to build them to have them ready to go or close to ready to go. And then God knows who it's for, but just asking God
right.
to, bless the person and who's being buried in the casket and their family and console them. So that's kind of part of it. It's not actually, the woodworking itself, but just that like it does put one in a reflective space that I can't
Yeah.
imagine doing it without faith. And it's an outgrowth of my faith more than my faith is because I'm doing this. But that's
Makes
one thing.
sense.
And then another thing is it's not like a wonderful craftly insight or anything. It's more just I think in this time where we like watch lots of videos of people making things and maybe they're sped up or maybe there's like the Martha Stewart trick of and then you mix it up, you put it in the oven, you take it out and it's all ready to go. It's just the sheer
Presto.
monotony of it is
Okay.
maybe what would be surprising. I've had people come and say like, "Oh, I'd like to make a video about," and there's been some good videos made, and I'm like, "Well, what do you want to do?" Like, "I'll just follow you around." And it's like, Okay, but like 8 hours of that is gonna be me with a sander in my hand trying to make this beautiful. So, it's like a lot of life in that way, in that the majority of the time is not, romantic or anything. It's just kind of monotonous and just keeping your head down and getting stuff done. I think it's maybe what might be the most surprising is how ready for YouTube it is.
When you spend most of your life building something that's going to hold a person's final chapter, how has that changed the way you think about living your own life?
Yeah, it's a great reminder, obviously, that no one knows the day nor the hour frequently.
Yeah.
But it's also a really potent reminder that we're never it's not a movie and it's not gonna be perfectly tied up and perfectly wrapped up at the end. I guess or one of the primary things I see out of doing it is just that it's almost cliche, right? But it's reinforced that for sure, um, we spend most of our time, most of our efforts, and certainly most of our thoughts and anxieties around things that are not anything that we're gonna be thinking about at the end of our lives, and that investing in eternity, investing in things that endure, it's something that needs to be called up repeatedly
Yes.
because there's just again, kinda going back to the whiz bang thing, there's just so many flashy things trying to pull us away from the essential, purpose of why we're here and what God's put in our lives. So, I would just say that a thing that a lot of people think, which is that, you gotta keep the gratitude first and foremost
Sure.
in your day. I get I get a lot more kind of potent or visceral reminder of that, both in building the caskets and then also in having the conversations with the families who some of whom call me and say, tragedy has struck, but I'm happy to report most of the time call me and say my dad or my grandfather just died and it was beautiful. And to s- to see that hope too, I guess amidst it all is um I'm very fortunate to have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us, Mark.
Yeah, there's tremendous hope.
You and Kelly have built a large family. How many kids?
We have 8 children, yeah.
Yeah.
On terra firma, 3 in God's hands.
Wow. So I think you are the record holder. Now you have that honor.
Yes.
Guest
That's why
with
we did it.
most kids to grace the microphones of the Main Thing podcast. The
Okay.
prize trophies will be shipped afterwards. But
Yeah, I
no,
can't wait to see what that is.
what are the age ranges?
Oldest is 25 and the youngest is 8.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I've got the upper end. I'm matched up with you there. My daughter will be 25
Okay.
this year, and then my son will be 21 this year. So we stopped after
That's
2,
awesome.
but we got a late start, so
Yeah.
it's all
Well,
good.
it's not anything I ever expected. I have 1 older brother. So and my parents were divorced. So
Okay.
my life is very different now than
Yeah.
the the pattern that I grew up with as an example.
Any of the kids showing an interest in the business?
All of them, well, the older ones, especially I would guess the 3 eldest, they all spent time working with me in the shop. And, I don't know about, like, the business, but as far as, like, getting their hands on tools and learning how to build things and not being
Yeah.
so surprised by how long things take like I was when I started doing it, I'm very grateful for the fact that they've all, like, gotten pretty handy. So I don't know. I had my oldest son and I talked about it. He's got a really neat job right now doing something else, and I don't know exactly where that might take them. The casket making is that's a little strange for a young person, but it doesn't feel that strange in our family. But it's not. They have good faith lives. Thanks be to God for that too.
Yeah.
But I could see woodworking or carpentry. That was a big part of it. Is like when we started it, we had a shop that was at our house, and it was like, oh, here's a chance where people can come out and they can use tools. And unfortunately, I wasn't always, as mentory and patient. Sometimes I had a casket I had to get out, and actually, I was
Right.
more like, you know what? It's going to be really dusty in here. I don't want you breathing that in. You got to go. And it's like I look back on that like, oh, I could have spent more time mentoring them. But of course, that's part of it too. That's all in God's hands. Um, so yeah, I don't know about the business in particular, but
Mhm.
it's been really good for them to get to learn how to do some basic woodworking and spend time out in the shop and seeing how things fit together. And they're all on the path to be better than me. I didn't really do any carpentry or woodworking until I was well into my 20s.
Wow. So you've planted some seeds there, and I guess the answer is we'll see.
We'll see. That's the answer. Yeah.
Mark, that brings us to this point in the show, the pivotal moment where I'm going to ask you the question that I've asked each and every wise guest. Mark Daly, what's the main thing you've learned in your lifetime so far?
Skip, the main thing I've learned in my lifetime so far is that we are created for community.
That's a rich statement. I can see a couple different layers of meaning in there. Why don't you present it for us?
Sure. So one of the things with the casket making, particularly for the last 16 years, has been, thinking about what makes for a good life and a good death. And actually, in the opposite order, what makes for a good death? Well, it's a good life. Okay, so let's go. There's been a lot of wisdom for thousands of years that people have written down on what a good life is. That led me to thinking a lot about the virtues as sort of a systematic way of thinking about what a good life is. The classical virtues in the Christian tradition are the cardinal virtues of prudence and justice and temperance and fortitude, and then the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. And I see those almost as steps in some ways, especially when we get to the theological virtues of faith to hope to love. So that's it, right? So love, St. Paul tells us, love endures. Of these three things, love endures. So love, as I've thought about it over the years, love is not actually an end. It is a state that leads to an end. And what does it lead to? Well, love leads to the will of the good of another. And so that desire for another's good, that's obviously, if we think about it, where real happiness and real peace comes from. And our heavenly destination that God has created us for is union with Him. And He is a communion. He is a Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And in that pattern, we are called through Him to love one another and to replicate that sort of community, that sort of love here on earth as best we can, which obviously is far from perfect, but striving for that so that when we come in to that heavenly paradise, please God, we will take our place with each, through Him with our brothers and sisters. And so that's really the path that took me to the we are created for community, is that everything that is sinful is divisive, and everything that is unifying is holy, or everything that is holy is unifying.
Yeah. And I think about how important love is, and the state. You described it as a state, not a destination. If you want to embrace and live out the greatest commandment, which is a two-part commandment, part A and part B, they both start with love. I'd better get good at that. I'd better understand it, learn it, practice it, and get pretty decent at it so that I can love the Lord with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and likewise love my neighbor as myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that really the great adventure of life? Like, as
It
we
is.
live every day and every moment, and when things are going badly, why are they going badly? And when things are going well, why are they going well? So often, I mean, it could ultimately, if you follow the thread, it'll get to that. Am I being self-centered, or am I being God-centered and then other-centered?
Yes. I could not love this main thing anymore. Mark, I wanted to ask you when that crystallized for you. When did that click? When did that crystallize? And you're like, okay, I just, if I can't hold on to anything else, this is the main thing.
It's hard to say for sure because it's such an unveiling, revelatory sort of thing to try to live out, that the click is ongoing. So it's more of I'm maybe at CLIII. I don't know how many I's there are in click before I get to CK. But I would say over like a few years ago is where I realized like that I think all of this is in the service of like the heart's deepest desire, which is to know and be known, to see and be seen, to love and to be loved. So I think I started with really the virtues, thinking about the virtues and thinking about how to take like kind of a practical, systematic distillation from what's been taught over the millennia, and then try to how to live that out to a good life. The wildness of existence that interferes with the scientific systemization, I realize that's it can be a big hindrance, and it can be a big interference to happiness and to doing good in the world. But it's also like there's this surrender involved to God's pull on us more than our marching in a straight line toward Him. So I would say a few years ago is when it really started to be like, this is worth pondering.
Can you kind of time mark that with anything that was going on in your life and family events or personal or something you were reading that brought that more into clarity for you? And I do understand completely that it is a journey and that you say truly that I'm Skip, I'm not all the way there yet.
Yeah. I think maybe COVID had something to do with it
Okay.
and the aftermath of it. It wasn't like in the midst of COVID, but I think feeling in that sort of whatever forces at work were at work that were isolating us from each other and seeing just how disastrous that was. And then that got me maybe thinking more about like solitary confinement, why that's the worst
Yeah.
punishment that you can give to a person and how people could just die from being alone. And so then taking that from just not just the sort of physical level, but into the transcendent reality of what that means for like who we are at our deepest being. That's an eternal desire. That's not merely a temporal desire. But I think COVID brought it to light just how damaging it was to be alone.
Mark, your main thing, we are created for community. If someone hasn't embraced that wisdom yet, if that hasn't lit up for them, what might their life be like? What might they be bumping into repeatedly that could be causing them stress or trouble?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of maybe goes with what I was starting to say. But yeah, I think
Okay.
fear of others, fear of, if you find your like well, we have this we have a basic animal nature where we have to survive or we want to survive. We're driven to survive. We feel competition, we feel threats, and that's totally understandable on a human level. I mean, on an animal level, I should say.
Right.
But
Survival,
but yeah,
identifying threats, quickly using our reptilian brain to evade those
right,
threats. Yeah.
right. But we have a spiritual nature as well as a physical nature. And the physical nature, it's got its time here, it's passing, and our spiritual nature is created to endure forever. And then obviously in the resurrection, the recreation of our physical nature. But like kind of the adventure of life in some ways is to try to bring that physical nature into our spiritual nature, that fearful, survival driven physical nature. But that can get in the way of our trust in God's love and desire for us to be with Him forever, in heaven and with the people we love. And so I think a lot of times with the challenge to the sense that we are created for communion is that we get competitive. This is something I wrestle with actually, Skip. Maybe you can help me out with it. Is I think C.S. Lewis has talked about competitiveness as being sinful, and that's a weird thing in a weird world where there's sports and stuff like that. But there is a really subtle way in which we're always like tempted to kind of try to elbow each other backwards just a little bit. And,
Yeah.
if we're better, if we're at the worst, we just try to smush them. But if we're maybe a little better, we just try to nudge them a step behind us or whatever it
Right.
is.
Right.
But just that fear that somehow other people are in competition for what God wants for all of us. I think that creeps in and pops up in different ways from just like a sharp word to someone we care about to a global war. The more we invest in that ultimate reality by the choices we make as far as what we say and what we think and what we do, the easier it will come to us and the happier we'll be. I'm sure of it.
Mark, let's bring this down to one or two application points. So your main thing is that we are created for community. If someone is not there yet, so they're a soul survival individualist, striving to outshine everyone around them, and they want to grow into more of a community, a communion way of living. What are two steps that they could take today or tomorrow to start down that path?
Yeah. Well, on a natural level, I would say put somebody else before yourself in a way that hurts even just a little bit,
Okay.
whether that's because it costs you something monetarily or because it's a little humiliating. Maybe that's asking for forgiveness in something and recognizing, the value of another person in that way.
Mm,
And then, I mean, that's a spiritual level
it's a
also. But
great
then I
one.
would say praying, praying for your enemies. Thinking about the people that you have the biggest axe to grind with, whether it's somebody you know or somebody in another place or whatever that is,
Disdain.
asking God to give him or her or them what they need. Because so often I think we put our wants before other people's needs. And I think that's very disordered. And if we
Hmm.
start thinking about and praying that other people have what they need, it will not only make us see their humanity, it will also help us to think about what it is that we really need. because a lot of times the things we want get in the way of our happiness and who we're created to be.
Yeah. Yep. Mark, as we're thinking through that question, I'm listening to your words, and I can't help but be taken back to a prior guest, retired Marine Commander Jake Harriman, who is all about bringing people of diverse orientations and backgrounds together and doing just what you're talking about, establishing community. And he challenged us to invite someone who is very different than you, who you have different lifestyle, different politics, invite them out for a cup of coffee and listen more than you talk.
Yeah,
And just,
that's good.
and he would say, look, realistically, I don't expect you to come to their point of view. And that's not the objective here. It's just to sit with that discomfort of someone who disagrees with you, who's unlike you, whose worldviews are different than you, and just let them talk and hear
Yeah.
them and sit with that and see what comes out of it.
Yeah. And in those situations, like if we can see someone's their common humanity, we
Humanity,
are made in the
right
image
above
and
your
likeness
head,
of God.
point right above your head,
Exactly. Yeah.
right
If I
there.
had, yeah. And so I can remember actually when I was coming back into my faith that I would go out in the streets of Seattle and people would ask me for money and I kind of made it a rule that I would ask them what for and they'd say for food, whether that was true or not. I'd say, well, let's go get something to eat. And I would go and sit for an hour and, we would eat, have a meal
Wow.
together or whatever.
Wow.
And it was a grace period because it was just like the wonder of God's, magnificence was just kind of shining through everybody for me at that point. So
Mm,
like
I
being
bet.
with
I
somebody
bet.
who, yeah. So just like your former interlocutor was saying, that just even going back to like when we were in school and stuff and I wasn't living my faith the way I should have been, I did have great friends like you. So even how you can only get so far from God if you're around people and really, trying to care about other people. Like,
Yeah.
so, there's no shortage of opportunity to interact with God through the people that he puts in our lives.
Great answer. I want to sum it up. Number one, your first part was your first recommendation, action step was to do something for someone else that is a little difficult or causes you a little bit of pain or discomfort. Put someone else first.
Yeah.
And then number two was to pray for our enemy, our opponent, pray for them. I think
Yes.
those are great application steps, and I'm going to do them.
Me too, now that I think about it.
Mark,
It's easy to sit on the sideline. Coach Holtz, who crushed our Mountaineers in 1988, just died
yeah,
yesterday, I think it was.
God rest his
And
soul. What a
yeah,
cool, what a great man.
but he wasn't
Colorful.
the fastest guy. He wasn't anything, but he had some wisdom. So just because I'm not perfect at doing what I say doesn't mean that I can't aspire to live up to my own ideals for what a good life looks like.
Just because I'm not perfect and I don't live out my own ideals doesn't mean that you shouldn't either.
Doesn't mean that we shouldn't.
Now, Mark, you've led us to some great wisdom in a beautiful place, and I just want to wrap it up with open mic for you to leave our audience of about 1,000 listeners who are very concerned with getting better at life, personal growth, spiritual development, finding personal practices that'll help them live a better life. What would you leave them with today?
Well, being a coffin maker and you talking about gardening and wanting to have your hands in the earth, humility comes from the same word as earth. What we see outside is becoming more and more fantastic and more artificial in a lot of ways, meant to
Yeah,
sell us something or get us on board with something. But remember that ultimately, God breathed our lives into us out of the earth, and we're going to return to the earth. And so much of the vast majority of the stuff that we are worrying about and thinking about and spending our time chasing after is going to go away. But love remains, and it remains so that we can be in community with God and each other. Try to keep that first and foremost and not the passing, fleeting, sensational pleasures that are constantly being dangled in front of us.
excellent advice. A great place to leave it, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on today, for sharing some wonderful stories, and for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much, Skip. It's great to be with you and honored to be a part of your podcast.
So long for now.
So long.
Hey, it's Skip, and I'm back to share just a couple quick closing reflections for you. There were a couple things from my conversation with Mark Daly that stayed with me. The first is this idea that to die a good death is the result of having lived a good life. That's simple, but it's not easy because it quietly asks a bigger question. Am I living in a way today that I won't have to run from later? Not perfectly, but honestly, intentionally. That one stuck with me. And my second takeaway is this one. His main thing, we are created for community, not isolation, not independence at all costs, but connection, shared life, people who know us, and people we show up for. And the more I think about it, the more I realize those two ideas are just interconnected. Because a good life isn't built alone. There was something about this conversation that didn't feel heavy at all to me. You know, it felt settling, peaceful even, like being reminded that the things that matter most aren't complicated. They're just easy to drift away from if we're not paying attention. So I've been sitting with this. What would it look like to live a little more on purpose this week? To lean into the people around me and to give my attention to the things that actually matter. Because maybe a good life isn't something we arrive at someday. Maybe it's something we build, one decision at a time. Hey, I encourage you to just stay grounded in what matters most.
That goes by incredibly fast, doesn't it? Time flies when you're hacking wisdom. Thank you for listening to this wisdom conversation. Let's give a big hearty thank you to the crew of the Main Thing podcast. These are the folks who truly keep the wisdom pipeline flowing. Audio engineer Bob Hotchkiss, strategy advisor Andy Malinowski, public relations and partnerships guru Rachel Bell, social media and digital marketing expert Chloe Linneberg, graphic designer Emma Malinowski, and of course our patrons, those generous folks who provide monthly funding support to help underwrite our costs of production. I couldn't do it without you, nor would I want to. Your feedback matters a lot. If you have a question, a suggestion, maybe an idea, or even a nomination of a future show guest, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at info@themainthingpodcast.com. Well, that's a wrap for this show. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg, signing off for now and inviting you to join us again next time for another special delivery of wisdom.